What one would call a once privileged young man who was voted in high school to be most likely not to be forgotten, set about seeking fame not as an actor, designer, model, or a war hero, but instead went down in history as a cold-blooded opportunist. We would call him a master of tragic human destruction. The young man's body lay in the master bedroom of a houseboat in Miami, Florida. For approximately a week, law enforcement authorities had been looking for the young man regarding his involvement in the murders of gay men around the United States. As police entered the houseboat after they received a tip as to the location of the fugitive, they found him upstairs in the master bedroom of the structure. Upon his stomach lay a .40 caliber firearm. SWAT team members were called in to storm the houseboat in an attempt to confront and possibly capture the fugitive. However, the young man ended the search with a simple gunshot as it appeared from the condition of the body upon its discovery. The young man who initiated the nationwide search for his suspicion in the murders was known as Andrew Cunnan, a young man from National City, California. Cunnan was the product of a Filipino father and an Italian-American mother. At the time of his son's birth, Cunnan's father, Modesto Cunnan, served with the American military in Vietnam and therefore was not in the country at the time of his birth. In 1981, Modesto Cunnan enrolled his son at the Bishop School in the La Jolla neighborhood of San Diego, California. As a teenager, school administrators had the youngster tested and learned he had an IQ of 147. Although he demonstrated excessive intelligence, young Andrew demonstrated a propensity to lie pathologically about his family and his personal life. Andrew also was very adept at changing his appearance to whatever behavior he believed comfortable with at the time. After graduating from high school in 1987, Cunnan enrolled at the University of California, where he majored in American history. During this time, Modesto Cunnan abandoned the family to escape from being arrested for embezzlement. Also at this time, Cunnan admitted to his mother that he was a homosexual. In an earlier display of the violence he would later demonstrate, he pinned his mother against a wall, dislocating her shoulder. After graduating from college, Cunnan moved to San Francisco, where he frequented high-class gay bars and prostituted himself out to older men. Cunnan possessed an insatiable need to be the most important person in the room. For the men that Cunnan kept as company, he appeared to be very well read and proved charming. Although he never appeared to have a visible system of monetary support, Cunnan always insisted that he pay the check whenever friends accompanied him to dinner. It seemed that his lifestyle and chosen profession, that of a male gigolo for older men, paid quite handsomely with gifts of cars, money, and clothing. The young man became heavily dependent on the generosity of his lovers. Although most gay men did not consider Cunnan to be that physically attractive, it was his social skills and his affinity for kinky sex that made him most desirable to his paramours. For a few years, Cunnan seemed to make a life of his deviance and his lifestyle that some seemed to envy. However, Something happened in approximately 1996, and no one knows what. Those closest to Cunnan stated that he may have had a psychotic break due to the immense amount of drugs he ingested. Then there was the rumor that one of Cunnan's benefactors dropped him rather abruptly. Within a short time, Cunnan went from a lavish lifestyle, where his lover allotted approximately $2,500 per month to spend on clothing and jewelry, to a pauper's existence. Perhaps it was the anger with which his lover threw him away that made Cunnan believe that he had to get even with anyone that he may have perceived was using him. His appearance suffered, and the young hustler showed up at his previous haunts where he did not bathe or cut his hair. He gained weight due to his ceasing exercise. At one point, he complained to a bartender at one of the bars he frequented that he could not even get a date. Cunnan then reflected on past relationships and remembered one David Madsen, an architect who resided in Minneapolis. Madsen distanced himself from Cunnan ever since the hustler ditched a sugar daddy and began selling drugs to make ends meet. Additionally, Cunnan also began getting high on his own supply. In mid-April 1996, Cunnan announced that he was moving to San Francisco. At this going-away party, Cunnan dined on beef tenderloin, ostrich, and trout. With his credit cards maxed out, the young man convinced his credit card companies to raise his limits. He bought an airline ticket, but not to San Francisco, to Minneapolis. He stated he had to go there to settle some business. Once Cunnan left California and made his way to Minneapolis, Madsen brought him to dinner, and the architect's friends were either impressed with Cunnan's charm or believed him to be a pompous, name-dropping egomaniac. 2 nights later, April 27th, Cunnan invited a friend named Jeffrey Trail over to Madsen's loft apartment in a trendy warehouse. The dimension of Trail and Cunnan's relationship still remains unclear. Some believe that the two were one-time lovers, and others believed that Trail acted as Cunnan's older brother. Some rumors spread that Trail and Madsen eventually became lovers as well. Investigators tried to piece together what happened in the cool April as Cunnan seemed to act in a frenzied manner. Neighbors of the architect stated that they heard violent shouting emanating from Madsen's apartment at approximately 10 p.m., along with several loud thuds. 2 days later, authorities discovered Trail's body wrapped in a carpet from Madsen's apartment. Trail suffered from blunt force trauma with over 24 hammer blows to his head and face. On May 1, 1997, Cunnan and Madsen drove to a lake 50 miles north of Minneapolis. When they arrived, Cunnan allegedly shot Madsen in the head with Trail's .40 caliber handgun. Cunnan then fled in Madsen's Jeep, where he was next spotted in Chicago. While on the way to Chicago, Cunnan managed to gain entry into the residence of 72-year-old real estate mogul Lee Miglin. Cunnan needed cash and a new means of getting away. Investigators discovered there was never a relationship between the two men, but Cunnan was on the run and needed provisions to travel. What appeared unnecessary was that the young fugitive senselessly tortured the elderly man, wrapping his head with duct tape with breathing space at the nose, then stabbing him repeatedly with pruning shears before cutting open his throat with a garden saw. After murdering Miglin, Cunnan went into the kitchen and breakfasted on some ham and an apple. He then took off in Miglin's 1994 green Lexus. Authorities later discovered Miglin's body covered with paper and debris in a detached garage close to his residence. After Miglin's wife, Marilyn, returned home, she discovered a firearm in the house that she knew her husband did not own. After this discovery, she went looking for her husband throughout the house, and once she could not locate him, she called the police, who searched the property and then located Miglin within the detached garage. Police later discovered that the victim had been run over 5 times with the car before the fugitive escaped. Authorities deduced that the victim had been stabbed over 49 times. It appeared that Cunnan suffered from an increased sense of rage, and authorities hoped they would catch the young man soon, or else the tragedy he forced upon the citizens of the country would soon spin out of control. Moving east, Cunnan happened upon the small New Jersey town of Pennsville. Within that town there stood a small, isolated national cemetery where William Reese, the caretaker, went about his daily routine until confronted with the wily killer. Witnesses claim that they spotted a man matching Cunnan's description laying in the grass of the cemetery sometime in the afternoon of May 9th. Cunnan observed the caretaker for a long time before confronting the man in his office, and marched him down to the basement of the office, then shot him once in the back of the head, killing him instantly. Cunnan, according to authorities, then stole Reese's pickup truck and hit the road. Outside of a palatial mansion located at or near present 116 Ocean Drive, Miami, Florida, the owner of the mansion, Gianni Versace, started as the creator of a line of what can only be termed nouveau clothing that reflected the brilliance, glamour, and ostentatious manner of its creator. Born into poverty, Versace had worked his way up through the fashion world to become an iconic innovator. Versace had a habit of downplaying or ignoring those who criticized his fashions as the height of bad taste. Although he had his detractors, Versace moved among the elite of Europe and the United States. On July 12th, he had just returned from a tour of Europe which left the designer quite fatigued. He wanted to rest. Added to that, Versace had been diagnosed with some sort of inner ear cancer that managed to stay in remission. At this point in his life, Versace looked for tranquility with which he earned. But a killer stalked him, frequenting the designer's haunts just for a glimpse and the hope that his prey would surface. It seemed every morning that Cunnan walked past the mansion gates several times while waiting for Versace to surface. On the morning of July 15, 1997, Cunnan went to the News Cafe and struck pay dirt. Versace showed up as was his morning habit. Versace got up from his table and proceeded to walk to his residence with Cunnan following closely behind him. Once Versace stepped up to the gates of his mansion, put the key into the lock, and then unlocked the gates. At that very moment, Cunnan fired 2 shots into the back of Versace's head. After Versace's murder, the authorities tried to rationalize why Cunnan murdered the designer. Some speculated that Versace turned down Cunnan for a male modeling job, or that Cunnan and Versace knew each other based upon the circles they frequented through their lifestyles. Once Versace's murder hit the news, reporters stated that Cunnan perhaps wanted to make a name for himself. This was due to the other murders which seemed unimportant in the press until the death of the fashion icon. Because the press managed to latch on to whatever whispers of news occurred, all eyes focused on the FBI and the Miami Police Department and their handling of the investigation. The hunt for the assassin became the major focus, especially when details from the other murders came to light. Although there were alerts that Cunnan was in the Miami area, the local citizenry was now on high alert to catch this killer. When members of the gay community learned this fact, they became incensed. Some complained that had they known of Cunnan's presence earlier, perhaps Versace did not have to die. Several opportunities to capture the killer presented themselves to the authorities, but the follow-up proved a failure. 4 days before the Versace murder, Cunnan was almost captured in a sandwich shop when the fugitive ordered a tuna sandwich. The employee, G. Kenneth Brown, took the order to the kitchen and sneaked to a phone to dial 911. Police were dispatched while Brown was still on the phone, and a co-worker took the customer's money and unwittingly let him walk out of the door. William Reese's Chevrolet pickup truck, which Cunnan drove from New Jersey, was parked in the garage of the hotel where the fugitive stayed in Miami. The local as well as the national populace wanted to know where the pursuit of the killer went wrong. One of the blunders actually could have seen Cunnan's capture some 8 days before Versace's murder. Strapped for cash, the fugitive tried to sell a gold coin he stole from Lee Miglin's townhouse in Chicago, Illinois. The clerk gave Cunnan $200, but the exchange required 2 forms of identification. The fugitive produced 2 forms of fraudulent identification, and the pawnbroker handed over the money. However, A form had to be filled out by the pawn shop and then sent to the local police department. The police department, at this point, was supposed to check the signatures. But since the regular clerk enjoyed a week-long vacation, the substitute clerk did not check the signatures. The police did not become aware of the discrepancy until after Versace's death. It appeared at that time that the police did not want to catch the killer. Once notification of this foul-up occurred, the SWAT team swarmed the Normandy Plaza, where Cunnan had been staying, and found nothing but empty rooms. Later, the hotel management realized they gave the SWAT team the wrong room number. By the time the authorities actually had access to the quarters that Cunnan did occupy, they found the room empty again. Some pointed fingers at law enforcement for not being able to apprehend the murderer because they did not understand how the gay community worked. Cunnan blended into this community, and had the authorities understood the reason for the fugitive's anonymity, he would have been easier to capture. The nationwide manhunt, therefore, produced little or no results. On July 23, 1997, a Portuguese caretaker made his rounds at the inclusive Indian Creek Canal to check on a private houseboat wharfed there by a German millionaire who went to Las Vegas a few days before. When the caretaker checked the door of the houseboat, he noticed it ajar and went to investigate further. When the caretaker made his way to the bedroom, he found himself face to face with Cunnan. The fugitive then ran into the bedroom and shut the door. The caretaker realized from the young man's strange behavior that he must be the fugitive that everyone was looking for at the time. He notified the police immediately. Within just a few minutes, police and SWAT arrived, surrounding the houseboat. For 3 hours, the FBI shooters inched their way closer to entering the residence and issued loud demands that the inhabitant make his way out of the houseboat with his hands up. This standoff lasted for 3 hours until 8:15 p.m., when authorities gave the order to rush the houseboat. Once the gas grenades had been deployed, the agents and law enforcement rushed the door. Once they cleared the lower quarters, then they fanned out and went up to the second floor. The lawmen expected to be met with frantic gunfire given the way that Cunnan desperately performed his killing spree. But what they found, initially, was silence, an eerie silence. Just when they thought that Cunnan had gotten away again, they found him, dead beside the bed with a gunshot wound made behind his right ear, with the golden saber pistol he stole from Jeff Trail. When Cunnan died at his own hand, he left an unnerving silence amongst society as a whole. It has been said that sometimes the causes of nightmares can be traced, but what motivated Andrew Cunnan is left unknown even to this day. The Cunnan case contained intrigue, deviance, personality disorders, and a dangerous aspiration to be rich, famous, and influential. Later examination produced several theories as to the motivations behind Cunnan's actions. Cunnan murdered Versace because he actually wanted to be that person. This made him feel superior to the police and validated his own superiority, but also made a very loud statement. Cunnan thought he could not be captured, maintained a steadfastness in making every public move. Some believe that Cunnan did not fit into the molds we have established when it comes to characterizing him as either a serial killer or a spree killer. And Cunnan was a chameleon, multiple personalities and multiple appearances. The last word on Cunnan can be summarized as this: the killer was the consummate killer storm. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of True Crime Man's Dark Imagination, and if you would be so kind, please contribute to our channel. We're now on Rumble, BitChute, Facebook, Twitter, and now we are on buymeacupofcoffee.com. You can follow us there as well. Until next time.